Ladies, welcome to the PSA's first hashtag Power Hour for Women. The Public Servants Association of South Africa, PSA, has since the union's inception in 1920 been committed to the empowerment of women. The PSA's commitment to equal treatment of women, for example, led to the change of Section 14, subsection 7 of the Public Service Act of 1957. This section made it possible to refuse married female public servants full-time employment. This, of course, deprived them of many benefits enjoyed by their male, married or single counterparts. This form of discrimination ended in 1971. The PSA's track record in opposing discriminatory laws and practices is impressive, yet its role in empowering women extends much further. August is annually celebrated by marking Women's Month, where tribute is paid to the thousands of courageous women who marched on August 1956 to be heard. This being the 65th anniversary also marks the remarkable changes that have been made over the years and inspiring us to continue with our efforts. The PSA pays tribute to all women of our country, the heroes of courage and so many other inspirational women, for their unwavering support, passion and dedication who have made invaluable contributions towards vulnerable communities. The PSA supports constructive interventions to inspire members and communities for the future. A huge and passionate thank you to our phenomenal partners, ASIPOL, Dignity, PSA Club and UNICEF for their support. Ladies, also join me in extending a warm welcome to the following inspirational and courageous speakers who will share their stories with us: Boitumelo, Bernally and Aneshri. Boitumelo Mokgatle is the founder and CEO of Muse Culture Property Limited. She is an experienced facilitator and self-taught life coach with more than 14 years of corporate experience. She lives by the motto that we all have gifts and talents that we can use to make a difference in the lives of those we touch, directly or otherwise, to allow us to create a mark that not even history can erase. Bernally Daniel can list numerous achievements, including being crowned Miss South Africa 1995, patron of Steps Charity, and joining the cast of Wedding Bashes. Yet, her main passion is her family and 2 sons who have added a new dimension to her life, a humbling experience to see life through their eyes. Aneshri Yasar is the director of Aneshri Yasar and Associates. She is an organizational development practitioner, facilitator and executive coach. Her purpose is to support creating spaces where brave leaders and courageous cultures can thrive. She believes that when people are supported to rise to their best, they can do amazing things in Africa and strives to be a part of this change. Ladies, please join me in expressing our sincere condolences to Aneshri for the loss of her husband to COVID-19. I request you to observe a few moments of silence in memory of so many lives lost to the devastating pandemic. Ladies, women made this hashtag Power Hour for Women event a reality. Be courageous, be inspired, and enjoy.
Hi there, ladies. My name is Bernally Daniel, and I'm honored to be spending Women's Day with you all today. Thank you to PSA and their partners for giving us this platform to share experiences, knowledge, and to learn from each other. I must admit, I pondered for quite some time about what to talk about today that would be inspiring, informative, even life-changing for some of you. But nothing really came to mind. I ended up chatting to a friend about it, and she said to me, but just talk about your life story. So that is what I'm going to be sharing with you today. A little trip down my memory lane. And I suppose it all started when I won Miss South Africa in 1995. So let's have a look at the moment my life changed forever.
Miss South Africa 1995 is Bernally Daniel.
I remember my mom slept with me that night, and we sat on the bed chatting for hours. She told me that the only advice she was going to give me was to just stay the same. Be the Bernally that people have fallen in love with. Don't let the sash or crown or title change who you are. Just continue to be Bern. My year was incredible, and the platform that it provided to impact people's lives proved to be indescribable. I traveled the country and was exposed to so many different people from all walks of life. And I always say that my year was my university to life. Miss South Africa was not all glitz and glamour, as many of you perceive it to be. Some days I averaged up to 9 appearances. And there was even a time when I landed back in Joburg from an event and literally swapped suitcases with my mom at the airport, only to get right back onto a plane. But I loved every second of it. Obviously, one of my highlights were the several times I got to meet Nelson Mandela. He invited me to his private residence for lunch, and we even went to the movies together. I still can't remember what we actually watched. I think at the time I was just too overwhelmed. But to this day, I treasure a written letter that he wrote to me when he was unable to attend the Miss World pageant that took place in South Africa in the Sun City Super Bowl that year. And I will never forget sitting at the banquet after the event, and security came to call me to say that Madiba was on the phone. I ran backstage, and somehow he had managed to track down a phone in the Super Bowl just to tell me that he was proud of me. But being with him taught me many valuable lessons. He always treated everyone with such kindness and respect, and I still mirror that today. But as they say, time flies when you're having fun, and before I knew it, my year was over. I actually felt quite emotional at the end of all of it. I still felt that I had so much more to give, but I finished my year filled with hopes and dreams and ready to conquer the world. But that is where the life lessons began for me. A few years later, I got married and had 2 beautiful sons, Mika and Mateo, and the outside world looked in on what they perceived to be a perfect life. But it wasn't. And unfortunately, my marriage ended after several years, and I found myself alone with 2 boys, then aged 2 and 4, and unemployed. I've always wanted a life that I could be proud of. And when I realized it wasn't turning out that way, I had the strength to start it all over again. I couldn't go back and change my beginning, but I was able to start where I was and change my ending. Being a single mom has proven to be the most challenging yet rewarding time of my life. Let's be honest, it is not easy. I entered the corporate world for the first time in my early 30s, and very quickly learned to master the act of juggling time. I have no doubt that all of us have mastered this already. How many times have we thought that we would not ever make it through a day? Yet we do. We do succeed, and we do make it to the other end. It is what women do best. For many years, I just took it one day at a time. Things very quickly became overwhelming. I felt I was just working all day. I've been in survival mode for as long as I can remember. Looking back, I realize now that the one person I forgot to nurture was myself. This is undoubtedly the biggest mistake we can ever make. We can't give our all to everyone else. We are important. We need to make time for ourselves. There has to be a balance. A few years ago, I learned this lesson the hard way, and I was diagnosed with chronic anxiety and depression. I found myself in a black hole with no way out, no escape, no motivation, and I was just running on empty. But being a mom and having my incredible family right by my side got me through some of the darkest moments in my life. Anxiety isn't a weakness. Living with anxiety, turning up every day, and just doing stuff is a strength most will never know. Ladies, life is hard. We fall, we break, we fail, but then we rise, we heal, and we overcome. That is how resilient we are. A few years ago, I decided that I was missing out on so many moments in my boys' lives due to work commitments and the challenges of trying to succeed in a corporate environment. I decided to join forces with my mom in running her business, BBS Gifts and Promotions. We specialize in bespoke branded corporate gifting and clothing. With this, I became slightly more flexible with my time, and I was then also able to be the mom standing on the sidelines of a sports field, cheering my children on. These are the moments where we don't get second chances in, because before we know it, our kids are all grown up. Ladies, spend time with your children, spend time with your family, as these are the memories that we will treasure for our lifetimes. I've always said that adding mom to my CV is something I am most proud of. My children have given me so much joy. But 26 years after Miss South Africa, I also had to realize that I am not the same person today on many levels. Yet many people expect me to look the same. A big lesson was to learn to ignore people's expectations of what I should look like. I have learned and am still learning to love the body that I'm in now. 3 years ago, I was approached by a production company to join the cast of Mnet's program, The Wedding Bashers. My initial response was absolutely not. I am not going to put myself back in front of the TV cameras again after so many years out of the public eye. I pondered on their proposal for quite a long time, and it was with great internal resistance that I actually accepted. Yet, it turned out to be the adventure of a lifetime. We filmed for months and attended the most beautiful weddings all over the country. I laughed, I cried, I had so much fun. And it actually proved to be very healing for me. It proved that I can do anything I set my mind to. It is never too late. I can overcome my fear. I often think back on how I would have regretted saying no. I would never have known what lay on the other side of fear. Ladies, sometimes life is scary, but don't let it stop you from doing something that you truly believe in. Chase those dreams. Live your life. The reward of personal success cannot be described. I've learned to not ever look back and see failures. What failures? These have just been my lessons, and we all have them. So, this is life. One day, you wake up in this place where everything just feels right. Your heart is calm, your soul is lit, and your thoughts are positive. Your vision is clear, and you're at peace. At peace with where you've been, at peace with what you have been through, and at peace with where you are headed. There is a past version of me that I am so proud of how far I've come, and I am there now. My wish for all of you is happiness and peace, not just today, but always. Let's continue to celebrate how special women are. Let us nudge each other to greatness, support each other to stay there. Let's continue to remind each other that we don't need to be like anyone else. We simply need to be exactly who we are. So just in case no one told you today You are enough. Together, let's smash our goals, create our magic, and spread love to all of those around us.
Hello, brave leaders of PSA. I'm Aneshri Yassa, Chief Courage Builder, and the role of my work is to support organizations in creating safer and braver places for people to thrive in. I'm really thrilled to be a part of this Power Hour for Women, so thank you, PSA, for the invitation. Today, we're going to talk a bit about courage, we're going to talk about vulnerability, and I'm also going to share with you a little bit about my life in the spirit of vulnerability. And at the end of the talk, I want to leave you with a question that you can reflect on in terms of answering your own call to courage. So let's dig in and let me share with you about my journey to this work. I've been in corporate for the past 20 years, specifically in corporate banking. Half of that time has been in operations. So I intimately understand frontline customer service and working with people on the front line. Halfway through that career journey, I became a manager of people. And I started learning the skill actually of how to coach, performance coaching and development. And I really, really fell in love with coaching. I also started understanding that there's times that we as leaders can be really great with people. And there's times also when we just miss the mark. And it actually takes a whole lot of courage to be that self-aware, to know when you're actually not hitting the mark the way you should in terms of building up people instead of breaking them down through words or actions. Now, when I started this call, I called you all brave leaders. And I want to clarify something right now. When we talk about leadership, in terms of the Dare to Lead work, which is the work that I do, it's not about a title or a position. We talk about leader of self first, because that's where it starts. So each one of us are leaders because we lead ourselves first. We lead ourselves in the way that we show up in relationships, at work or at home. We lead ourselves in the way we take accountability for what's entrusted to us and the work that we have to do, in apologizing and making amends if needed, right? We lead ourselves in our homes, in our communities, and at work. So first and foremost, remember that you are a leader. You're a leader of yourself, and that's where it starts. And it takes courage. It does take courage to be aware of your strengths and also of your areas of development and where you can actually improve upon. So in terms of my career, I actually then decided I want to do a career shift. So still while working for the organization, I went back and I studied a master's in organizational development, which really is industrial psychology, leadership development, and team effectiveness work, and how to help cultures shift in organizations. Based on that qualification, I was then able to get into the role in the organization in organizational development. In 2019, I had the privilege of actually studying a very specific type of process called Dare to Lead, which is the work that I now do on my own. This work is actually by a professor called Dr. Brené Brown. And she has, for the last 20 years, so, over 2 decades, studied a very interesting topic, which is vulnerability. If you have yet to hear of Dr. Brené Brown, I would suggest that you start by YouTubing her. And there's a TED Talk called The Power of Vulnerability, which really introduces us to the work of vulnerability. In addition to vulnerability, Dr. Brené Brown also studied topics like shame, which is a really hard emotion that we all have and we all have to deal with, and then how to counter that with the antidote of empathy and self-compassion. In the last 7 to 8 years, Dr. Brené Brown and team then started focusing the same research but bringing it into organizations. And the purpose of that was to understand, how do we as human beings rehumanize workspaces by owning our emotions, by being able to be more courageous in how we show up and more authentic in that way as well. This then led to her book, which is Dare to Lead. Now, Dare to Lead initially started off as a book and was then translated into an actual program, a courage building and emotional resiliency program, which we now teach. I was fortunate enough to go in 2019 to Texas, where Professor Brené Brown teaches, and to learn this methodology. When I came back to South Africa and back to my workspace, after a few months, I decided to answer my own call to courage, which had been brewing in my mind for a while. I wanted to go out on my own and see what it would be like to be an entrepreneur and practice this work on my own. And so I did that in September of 2019. So I am now a certified Dare to Lead facilitator, one of a handful in the country. I take this work very serious. It is my core purpose, because it's all about helping each individual, each leader, each team member become more authentic and build workspaces where we can actually just thrive in. Robin Sharma, who is a leadership guru, has this wonderful saying that I want to share with you. He says, awareness precedes choice and choice precedes results. In other words, if you want certain results in your life, be it in the way that you lead, be it in your relationships, be it in the way that you show up in certain ways, whatever those results are, it's going to depend on the choices you make. And the quality of those choices depends on the level of self-awareness that you're willing to bring into it. So self-awareness really matters. Understanding your strengths, understanding your weaknesses in areas of development, understanding your triggers and what actually sets you off and how you behave as a result of that. Because who we are is how we lead. Self-awareness and self-love truly matter. So what is courage, this lovely word courage? For so long, we've associated the word courage with big bravery acts, right? Or superheroes. And yes, we do need our superheroes and we do need our brave firefighters and people that are working on the front line, really risking their lives for the greater humanity. But what I want to talk about is actually what the core of courage actually is. Courage comes from the Latin word cor, C-O-R. And actually, the core meaning of core is to speak all of one's mind by sharing all of one's heart. In other words, courage is about speaking your truth. We are able to access this everyday type of courage, and that is what we actually need more of in relationships and in organizations. when the research was done for Dare to Lead, and when they looked at a number of teams and leaders, and the question was asked around, where do we lack courage in organizations? The number one reason, and there were top 10, but the number one area that we actually need to develop more courage in is our ability to have more tough, open, honest, respectful conversations with each other. So often we shy away from speaking our truth, right? And when asked why do we not, more often than not, have tough conversations? The answer was, I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. It doesn't feel kind to say that. But what actually happens? We end up talking about people to others than talking to them. And that's neither kind nor clear, right? So the kind of thing to do is to develop the ability to learn how to have those tough, open, honest, respectful conversations. That is the kind of thing to do. And that's what sits at the heart of courage, to be able to speak your truth. Being women, I had to put this slide in because this is something that we are very, very good at doing, which is connection. And unfortunately, in a very alpha-driven world, we downplay this part of ourselves. And I'd really like to encourage us to own this. We define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can receive and give without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. These are skill sets that, as women, we are actually intuitively good at doing. And it's about owning that part of ourselves, because especially in times like this, in these uncertain, scary times, we need more connection. We need more people allowing each other to feel seen, heard, and valued without judgment. Which then brings me to a very interesting topic, which is vulnerability. We say that you can't get to you can't get to courage without rumbling with vulnerability. When the research was done around how do you build courage, actually, what came out as the number one skill set of courage building is our ability to actually work with vulnerability and to reframe our relationship with vulnerability. So let's talk a little bit about vulnerability, and then I'm going to share also a personal experience, a current one, with you. And I hope in doing that, you'll be able to see vulnerability in a different light. We define vulnerability as the emotion we experience when there's uncertainty, when there's risk, and when there's emotion. We are not talking about system vulnerability here or technical vulnerability. And by that, I mean our banking apps, or when we produce a product or a process, we don't want there to be vulnerability in the coding. We don't want there to be uncertainty or risk and having that system exposed to risk, right? What we are talking about here when we talk about courage building is relationship vulnerability. The ability to be more vulnerable in relationships, because that is courageous. And when we look now at vulnerability, what I want to share with you is that vulnerability is like two sides of a coin. Vulnerability is core to hard emotions like shame, like scarcity, fear, anxiety, grief, uncertainty. All of those things make us feel risky, uncertain, exposed. We don't want those feelings. We don't like them, right? But what we also need to see is that in addition to vulnerability being core to the hard emotions, they are also the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, connection. Let's think about that for a moment. When we love someone, right, it feels uncertain. It can feel risky. You're exposing yourself emotionally in a relationship, right? But we love in any case. It's courageous to do that. Look at joy. When we lean into joy, it does feel uncertain because we don't know if that joy is going to be there forever, right? It feels risky. We're exposing ourselves, but we do it in any case. Here's what I want to share with you from a personal perspective. Right now, I am recovering from COVID pneumonia. And it's been one of the hardest journeys that I've had to follow. In addition to that, I've also lost my husband, who passed away last month. I share the story with you, not because I want pity, but because I want to encourage you to know that it's vulnerable to feel both grief and the fear that comes with having, firstly, having been infected by COVID, and then having to go through losing someone, a loved one in the home. But it's also a vulnerable feeling to lean into and remembering moments of joy, remembering the love that's there, and to remain strong, to call on the courage, that real deep inner courage, so that I can still be there for my 9-year-old son and help him through this process as well. So vulnerability is so core to courage. And as I share the story with you, I hope that it is in some way a connection to you, that if you are going through something similar, if you've been through COVID, if you are supporting a family member, because that's also hard when you are the caregiver and the caretaker and helping someone through this healing process, or if you've lost someone also as a result of this virus, you are not alone. And it takes courage to feel the feelings that come up and not try to suppress them. It takes courage to ask for help. And as women, we can be so, we can sometimes want to keep on that superwoman cape and feel as if we can do it all. But I want to say to you right now that it takes courage to ask for support and also to be willing to receive help and support. Be it from work, by saying, you know what, right now I'm struggling and I need support and this is what it looks like. And for team members who are also, having to hold the fort while you have other team members off ill or struggling, it also takes courage to be able to offer empathy, right? And to also to be able to be there as a human being for one another. Right, so this is a courageous thing that we are doing together as a country, as a world, right? And you're not alone. Just know that. When I look at vulnerability back again in the workspace, it's vulnerable to, in all these ways on the left-hand side, all of these areas, empathy, trust, innovation, creativity, be able to have hard conversations, being able to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to create a gender equitable organization, all require vulnerability. Because in order to do all of those things, we must be willing to sit in that space of not having the answers to everything, but be willing to listen, to understand, and to be able to actually just show up and be saying, I might not have the answer, but I'm willing to be here and try to understand it with you. That's vulnerable. So I want to tell you that vulnerability is not weakness. It's actually our most accurate measure of courage. In the full Dare to Lead program, which we run virtually over 8 sessions, 8 half-day sessions, we get into the heart of vulnerability. We really work with building that skill set. And it's one of 4 skill sets of building courage. The other 3, in addition to vulnerability, is living into our values. So learning how to understand what your personal values are and the behaviors associated with it, and to operationalize that, which means to practice it. The next skill set that we then look at is braving trust. So how to build trust with yourself, and we have a model for that, and how to build trust in a team. And the final skill set of building courage is then learning to rise, which is basically saying, when we are being courageous, when we are being brave with our lives, there's going to be moments that we fail, that we have a setback, that things don't go the way that we want. We've shown up for this tough conversation and we've spoken our truth and the other person hasn't reciprocated it, right? They haven't taken it the way we intended. And it feels hard, it feels like a setback, it feels like a failure. So learning to rise is a process that we use in how to reset and how to rise back up from a setback. And that becomes the 4 skill sets of learning how to be more courageous as a human being, as a leader. So our time is nearly up, but I want to leave you with the following questions. And you can screenshot this or you can write it down right now as we're speaking, which is how to answer your own call to courage. So there's 2 questions that I'd like you to explore. The first is, what is your personal call to courage? In other words, ask yourself, where do I specifically want to be braver in my life? Ask yourself that question. You might not get the answer immediately, but sit with it and make notes as they come up. Where specifically do I want to be braver? Is it in the relationship I have with my partner? Is it something at work? Do I want to be more courageous or more braver in the way that I ask for what I need or in setting boundaries? Okay. And then the second part to this question, as you're thinking about what is my personal call to courage, is about figuring out what is the barrier, what's getting in the way of you answering your call to courage. And the way I'd like to do this, or the way I did it for myself, is to think about what topic specifically feels too difficult to think about. You know, when I'm thinking about where I want to be braver, what's that topic that feels too difficult to think about? But you know that if you tackled it, you would actually be unlocking a key to answering your call to courage. So it's really asking you to look at the hard stuff, the barrier, the wall that's getting in the way of you being braver. So with that said, the last thing I want to say is courage is contagious. Whenever you are being braver with your life, whenever you choose to show up, even if you can't predict the outcome, whenever you're willing to have that tough, open, honest conversation, whenever you're willing to just be more courageous, it's inadvertently giving permission for the people around you to also step into their courage. And that's how we scale courage in organizations. So with that said, I want to thank you for your time. Once again, thank you to PSA for the invitation. And as I leave you, I hope that you stay safe, brave, and kind always. Take care and goodbye.
I'm often confronted by a series of events, some of which were unfruitful, unfavorable. However, most of it, if not all, is what shaped the woman that I am today. It was a beautiful spring day on the 6th of September 1982, cloudy with a chance of rain, the day that I was born. I was born from a teenage mother and she was only 16. When she tells me her story, it was a no-brainer. I was her joy. Soon after the postnatal pains healed, my grandmother sent her off to go look for a job. Definitely not ideal. All her joys were turned into tears. Well, the tears never stopped from the day that I was conceived. I wasn't part of the plan, but she still considered me her joy, regardless of the circumstances. 2 years later, into her working life, she met the man who changed her life forever. She was the beauty and he was the beast, literally. But for my mom, it was an easy choice. It was a better escape from having to deal with the reminders of the disappointments from 2 years ago. Shortly after they met, the man made her a wife. At 18, she was now someone's wife, and she was pregnant with my little brother, and 3 years later again, my second baby brother. I vanished in that picture-perfect family. There was just no place for me. At the age of 9, somehow I resurfaced again in the light, but it wasn't for the spotlight. I was removed from a comfortable environment with my grandmother. At the time, my mom thought she was saving me for a better life. With my grandmother, we were poor, eating from the dumpster and scratching around to get a meal. We lived in a 2-bedroom house with a big family of 21, including uncles, aunts, cousins, and whoever needed a place to stay. My grandmother was that woman. Living with my mom and her husband, what I thought was going to be great turned out to be a nightmare. I knew of getting a hiding when I was naughty, but that was beyond what I could have imagined. It was worse than a Cinderella story. The beating, the insults, and the hate was insurmountable. I could take my grandmother's house anytime. I was happy scrapping for food. I was okay sharing a bed with 10 cousins. To me, that was happy. That was my happy place. I was joy, and I brought nothing but joy. That made me appreciate what I had or lack of. Fast forward to when I was 12 years old, going on 13. I was more the help. I cleaned, I cooked, I did the laundry. I looked after my brothers. I practically raised them. I was raised to believe that as a girl, I needed to be everything. I needed to do everything. My baby brothers didn't know better. They were taught to believe that everything wrong needed to be pinned on me. I would get a beating for even breathing. That's how bad it was. I then discovered the long-kept family secret, that the man that is raising me was not my biological father. It all started to make sense. I've always wondered why I was treated differently. Was I because I'm a girl? I understood why at the age of 6 I wasn't allowed to be in a picture with my siblings, that I was treated differently. But that made me even more scared. I dare not ask. It would have made my life a living hell. Well, I was already in it. I kept my voice on mute because I believed in order to live in peace, you do not dare stand up to the mouth that feeds you. You have to earn a plate by accepting the constant beating. It was like his hobby. What do you do for fun? I beat up my wife and stepdaughter. Well, I can laugh about it now, but back then it was unbearable. As my siblings and I grew older, it affected my social interaction with other kids. I wanted to be a man. I wanted to have authority over other kids, especially girls. I wanted to dominate. I was tomboyish and had a different sexual preference. When my peers started dating in high school, I didn't understand why someone would want to have a man in their lives. I knew I was a girl. There was that femininity that existed in me, but I hated it. I was curious and always admired the one group of lesbians at school. I could only dream because I knew it was looked down upon in my family and community. I knew if I was a lesbian, no men would think of trying their luck with me. But that was not the reality with the women. I found out the battles they had to fight, and I realized it was worse than where I was. It felt right to be a man, to want to dominate. I had it in me, but I couldn't act on it because I knew the consequences. At 16, I was faced with the harsh reality of experiencing the worst of the situations I was in. It was one of those living nightmares. He came home from work and I could smell his anger as soon as he entered the gate. I started with a spoon in a sink and led to my mom unconscious behind the door. I thought I was never going to hear her voice. She wasn't breathing. Her voice was muted. It was that moment when I gained courage. I finally stood up to him. I regained my voice, but that was short-lived because he kicked me out of the house. It was a bittersweet feeling. I was glad he kicked me out. I felt free, but in the same breath, I felt great amount of fear covering my body at the state I left my mom in. My brothers were too young. I needed to assume responsibility. What if she's dead? Fear got a hold of me. Thank heavens that was not the case. I was soon forced to go back home. Clearly, he wasn't done with me. When I completed matric, I was excited. Even though my marks were not great, I passed. It was enough for me to escape the hellhole I knew I would no longer have to live in. I was terrified at this man. I forced myself to laugh at his jokes, even when they were not funny. I had dreams of becoming a fashion designer and a chartered accountant. My marks could only get me entry level to university as a designer and not an accountant. But that was fine, just as long as I left home with a purpose. That dream was shattered with like glass against a rock. I was told I couldn't go to school. The family wasn't ready. My stepdad wasn't having it. That's when it all started. I couldn't do it anymore. This life thing. I decided I wasn't living up to my name. I felt like a burden. I hated myself and my life. I did not bring joy in people's lives and do not serve any purpose. I was 18. I needed to end the pain. So I took all the pills I could get a hold of in the house. Fortunately, nothing happened. I'm still here. The worst that happened to my body was me sleeping longer periods and feeling a little drowsy. My stepdad refused for me to get medical care or to go to the hospital. He told my mom to let me die because that's what I wanted. My mom, being my mom, I can just imagine what was going through her head. And she was just beside herself. The next morning, I tried to go to the clinic. I couldn't walk. A journey that could have taken me 30 minutes took me 2 hours. In a space of 3 years, I tried to end my life. All resulted in failed attempts. Clearly, my purpose was bigger than what I could have imagined. Fast forward, I got a job in corporate. It felt right. My life was about to change forever. I finally found my place in the world. I still lived with the scars from the past, physically, emotionally, and mentally. I learned to put a mask a long time before COVID came. COVID definitely found me ready. My life on the outside was perfect. I was liked. My job was great. I inspired a lot of people. but the pain crept in at night. My past haunted me. It felt like a nightmare in Elm Street. The reality was that that little girl who was afraid from the age of 9 still lived inside of me. She never left. She was still afraid. As I was traveling through this journey in corporate, I met a version of my stepfather in the form of a colleague who was dominating, intimidating, and controlling. I met a version of the woman I once wanted to become, my boss, dominating and feared. I met different versions of me that I didn't like, that led me to hating myself even more because of the mask I put on. I allowed people to take advantage of that little girl who could do the work without asking questions, who never stood up for herself, who believed that hate uniformed as care is love. Eventually, in December of 2014, that little girl met the adult version of me. The two worlds collided, and it wasn't pleasant anymore. Because of pulling two different directions, one needed to go, and none of the two versions was willing to back down. I love that 9-year-old version of me. She wasn't willing to back down, at least not without a fight. And I'm glad that she did. All she ever wanted was to be heard, for the volume to be turned up. And because of her, I'm sitting right in front of you today. I found my voice. I gave myself permission to let go of what was no longer serving me any good. The pain, the hurt, the anger. I had no choice. What was required was self-reflection and taking responsibility for where I had missed the mark. It took me a psychiatric hospital and a suicide attempt to really seeing the things that I wanted to change and really dealing with the things that I needed to change. I remembered who I was. I remembered my name. I refused to allow anger and pain and fear to define who I was. In 2016, I left corporate to start my own business. It was the most daunting yet exciting time of my life. I finally built the courage to finally make a decision on my own. I was willing to completely die of the woman I was. In order for the rebirth of the version of me, I needed to trust myself. I was done allowing the past to define my identity. Society has embedded some belief in our minds of who we are or who we should be. If we depend on what people think about us, what we're supposed to be doing or look like, what to love, we're not going to ever be authentic self. I gave myself permission to create a doorway to being me and living my purpose by reconstructing my way of thinking. I hacked the system. I gave myself permission to take up space, tell my truth, to use the platforms and opportunities in my life to shift people's views and perspectives. I am here to help you see the world differently than how you've seen it before. I took up space. For the longest of time, I turned the other cheek. I kept my voice on mute, even when I didn't need to. The truth is dimmed by light in order to do what I thought was right. I was told I was too loud and I made too much noise. I gave myself permission to use my voice, to be loud and to make noise. Even when it's a little bit shaky, even when it's a little bit squeaky, my voice will be heard. It's my voice that will keep the movement going for generations to come. Let me leave you with a thought. In a more realistic world, it would be one of life's greatest joy to not be placed in a box where we are forced to define ourselves according to the standards of the world, to not conform to the patterns of our society and the designs of how we should be thinking. Think about your place in the world, your identity, your purpose. How will your story end?
In August, women are traditionally honored for their invaluable role in society. On the 9th of August 2021, the 65th anniversary is commemorated of thousands of women who marched to the union buildings to be heard. Women are now prominent in professional and public spaces. they are independent and support their families. Women have opened doors that allow them to progress and succeed, realizing their true potential and conquering every field, be it in science, technology, politics, literature, arts, sports, or motherhood. Mothers, whoever fulfilled that role in a child's life, are truly worthy of honor. Whether she was a biological mother, grandmother, caregiver, foster care mother, adopting mother, teacher, or mentor, makes no difference. If she cared, loved, encouraged, and believed in you, she is honored and deserves this tribute. She values her self-worth and reminds other women of theirs. She is courageous and uses her voice to uplift and build others. She can never shy away from having empathy and taking care of the sick. She prays for her children no matter the circumstances. She will feed a child and go hungry herself. She is dedicated to serve. She inspires. The PSA, the Union of Choice of thousands of female South African public sector employees, pays tribute the women of our country.
Dear friends, my name is Muriel Mafiko. I am the Deputy Representative for UNICEF South Africa. On behalf of UNICEF South Africa, I would like to extend sincere gratitude to the Public Servants Association for supporting the care and protection of children. The recent unrest in South Africa has reminded us of the challenges that exist in the country, despite the notable gains that were made since the dawn of democracy. Poverty, unemployment, inequality impact on children. And that is why your contribution makes a difference. Through this assistance, among others, UNICEF is able to support Safe Parks initiative in partnership with the government of South Africa. Safe Parks are spaces where children from deprived communities can go to after school and even on weekends. It is a place where they have a meal, they're able to play, read, sing, and dance, as well as do their homework. And most importantly, they receive care and psychosocial support. The Safe Parks allow for friendships to be formed, lives to be improved, and makes a difference in the communities in which they are located. The collaboration between PSA and UNICEF South Africa has supported a total of 10 organizations implementing community-based prevention and early intervention programs in Safe Parks nationally. Through this partnership, the Public Servants Association is nurturing an environment where children are cared for, protected from violence, exploitation, and exclusion. The reality is that investment in family-friendly policies, including childcare, ensures that parents have the necessary resources and services they need to support their children at every stage of their development. We look forward to continuing this collaboration to strengthen service delivery for every child and make sure that we leave no child behind. Thank you, Public Servants Association.
Hello, I'm Khotso. I'm so blessed to say that I had COVID and I live to tell my story. Although it was really tough being ill, I knew that our family members will be fine should the unthinkable happen. Because of I took out a PSA Club Protect funeral plan for only 69.99 rand per month. Everything our family will need to give me a dignified funeral will be covered. Airtime, prepaid electricity, groceries, flowers, and even a 3-day car hire. All the funeral support benefits you don't get with other plans, all in one product. As an added benefit, I also took out the PSA Club for Family Funeral Support Plan to look after our out-of-town family members. It covers costs like accommodation, transport, meals, and drinks for only 54.99 rand per month. Life is hard, guys. You never know what lies ahead. So, don't delay. Call us now on 0860 021 067 today and find out more about the PSA Club Funeral Support products underwritten by Assupol. Oh, by the way, Happy Women's Month to all our beautiful ladies. Be blessed and be safe.
A note of appreciation to the 3 inspiring speakers, Anushree, Bernalee and Boitumelo, to our female leadership for their contributions to the hashtag PSA Power Hour, to our partners UNICEF, Dignity and Assupol for their support, to the Heroes of Courage, Susan Molokome, Pretty Barrington, Kebule Lena Fredman, Wendy Ndima, Ganu Nakedi, Silindile Mtembu, Lizzie Nkambule, Juliana Philander, Sunette van Zyl, and so many other inspirational women for their unwavering support, passion and dedication that have made invaluable contributions towards vulnerable communities. To all South African female public sector employees, on Women's Day, the PSA, the Union of Choice, pays tribute to all the women of our country. I thank you.